When an avoidant ends a relationship, they're rarely making a decision based on genuine incompatibility or lack of love. Instead, they're responding to an overwhelming buildup of attachment anxiety that their nervous system can no longer tolerate. The breakup becomes their ultimate defense mechanism, a way to restore emotional equilibrium by eliminating the source of their internal conflict. The avoidant doesn't break up because they don't care about you. They break up because they care too much, and their psychological conditioning interprets that caring as danger. Their nervous system has learned that emotional attachment leads to pain, disappointment, or loss of autonomy. So when feelings become too intense, their unconscious mind activates the ultimate escape route, ending the relationship entirely. This explains why avoidant breakups often seem sudden and confusing to their partners. You may have thought things were going well, that you were growing closer, that the relationship was progressing naturally. But for the avoidant, that very progression was triggering increasing levels of anxiety and panic about losing themselves in the connection. The breakup serves multiple psychological functions for the avoidant. It immediately reduces their attachment anxiety by eliminating the threat of further emotional investment. It restores their sense of autonomy and control by removing the person who was triggering their fear of engulfment. Most importantly, it allows them to return to their comfort zone of emotional independence without having to face the vulnerability that deeper commitment would require. However, the relief they feel after breaking up is typically temporary. Once the immediate anxiety subsides and they've restored their emotional equilibrium, they begin to experience the loss of what they've given up. The person who felt suffocating when they were present starts to feel essential when they're absent. The relationship that felt overwhelming when it was happening starts to feel precious when it's gone. The post-breakup journey from relief to regret. The avoidance post-breakup experience follows a predictable psychological pattern that almost always leads to some form of return. In the immediate aftermath, they experience profound relief. The suffocating anxiety disappears, replaced by freedom and control. They convince themselves they made the right decision, focusing on overwhelming aspects like your emotional needs and pressure for commitment. This relief period can last from days to several weeks, depending on how attached they had become. The more they loved you, the longer this phase typically lasts because they need more time to regulate their attachment anxiety. During this time, they tell themselves they're better off alone, that they value their freedom too much to be tied down. As the relief fades, they begin noticing the absence of positive aspects they hadn't appreciated. They start missing your laugh, your understanding, your unique way of seeing the world. They realize that while they gained freedom, they lost companionship, support, and the comfort of being truly known. The relief of being alone starts feeling more like loneliness than liberation. Eventually, their memory begins to idealize the relationship while minimizing the anxiety they felt. They remember the best moments with crystal clarity, while the overwhelming feelings fade into background noise. You become the one who got away, the person who understood them better than anyone else. The relationship that could have been perfect if only they had been brave enough to stay. Most avoidants eventually reach a point where regret outweighs relief, where missing you becomes stronger than their fear of attachment. They begin wondering if they made a mistake, if they threw away something precious out of fear, if there might be a way to reconnect without triggering the same overwhelming anxiety that drove them away initially. The inevitability of return. Why avoidants can't stay away? Several psychological factors make an avoidance return almost inevitable, regardless of how final their initial departure seemed. Unlike breakups that occur due to fundamental incompatibilities or loss of love, avoidant breakups leave both parties with unfinished business, unresolved feelings, and unexplored potential that continues occupying mental and emotional space long after the relationship has ended. The avoidant knows they didn't leave because they stopped caring. They left because they cared too much to handle safely. This awareness creates ongoing internal tension that can only be resolved through reconnection or genuine closure. Time doesn't diminish their sense of incomplete connection. It often intensifies it as they gain perspective on what they actually lost. Avoidants often don't fully appreciate what they have until it's gone. During the relationship, they're so focused on managing anxiety and protecting autonomy that they can't fully absorb the positive aspects of connection. It's only in absence that they begin understanding the true value of what they've lost. They discover that what they had with you is rare and difficult to replicate with others. Despite their defensive strategies, avoidants still have attachment needs that were being met in your relationship. When those needs go unmet for extended periods, their attachment system reactivates and begins seeking reconnection with the person who previously fulfilled those needs most effectively. This reactivation often occurs when they face stress, loneliness, or life challenges that remind them of how much support and understanding you provided. The many forms of avoidant return. How they come back. When avoidants do return, it rarely looks like a straightforward request for reconciliation. Their return often comes in indirect forms that protect them from the vulnerability of admitting they mistake while testing your receptiveness to renewed connection. The most common form is the casual, seemingly innocent check-in message. They might text about something that reminds them of you, share a funny meme you'd appreciate, or ask how you're doing under the guise of friendly concern. These messages appear casual but are actually carefully calculated tests of your emotional availability and receptiveness. Avoidants often reach out during personal crisis when their usual support systems feel inadequate and they remember how well you understood and supported them. They might contact you when dealing with family problems, work stress, health issues, or other life challenges that make them crave the comfort and understanding you once provided. Sometimes they return by referencing shared memories or experiences that were meaningful during your relationship. They might mention a place you visited together, a song that reminds them of you, or an inside joke you shared. This nostalgic approach allows them to acknowledge the value of your past connection while testing whether you share their sentiment. Rather than making dramatic declarations, avoidants often attempt gradual re-entry into your life through increased contact, invitations to spend time together as friends, or involvement in your social circle. They're essentially trying to rebuild connections slowly without having to face the vulnerability of admitting they want the relationship back. Many avoidants return when they learn you're dating someone else or appear to be moving on successfully. This triggers their competitive instincts and forces them to confront the reality that their window of opportunity for reconciliation might be closing. The threat of permanent loss often motivates action they weren't capable of taking when they felt secure about your continued availability. Why their return doesn't always mean they've changed. While avoidant exes almost always come back in some form, their return doesn't necessarily indicate that they've overcome their attachment issues or developed the capacity for healthier relationship dynamics. Many return not because they've learned to handle intimacy better, but because they miss the comfort and familiarity of your relationship while forgetting the anxiety that drove them away. Some return because they need validation that they're still important to you, that they still have power to affect your emotional state, or that they haven't been completely replaced. This ego-driven return is more about their need to feel significant than about genuine desire for a renewed relationship. Sometimes avoidants return because reconnecting with you feels easier than doing the work of building new relationships or addressing their attachment issues. You already understand them, accept their limitations, and provide a known quantity of comfort and support. This convenience factor makes returning seem like the path of least resistance. Learning to distinguish between an avoidant who has done genuine work on their attachment issues and one who is simply cycling back into familiar patterns can save you from repeated heartbreak. Signs of genuine growth include their ability to articulate what went wrong and take responsibility, seeking therapy or doing other attachment work, discussing fears and triggers openly, demonstrating sustained emotional availability, learning to communicate needs for space without disappearing, and showing genuine empathy for pain their previous behavior caused. Signs of temporary return include minimizing the significance of the breakup, expecting to pick up where you left off without addressing what went wrong, becoming defensive when you express concerns about their past behavior, repeating the same hot and cold patterns, avoiding discussions about the future or concrete commitments about change, and seeming primarily motivated by loneliness or convenience rather than genuine desire for growth. Making empowered decisions about their return. When your avoidant ex does return, and they likely will, you'll be faced with crucial decisions about how to respond. These decisions should be based on clear-eyed assessment of both their growth and your own needs, rather than hope for what the relationship could become. The fact that an avoidant comes back doesn't mean you were right to wait for them, or that their initial decision to leave was wrong. Their return is about their internal psychological processes, not about your inherent value or the objective quality of your relationship. Don't interpret their return as proof that you're worthy of love. You are worthy before they left and remain worthy regardless of their decision to return. Many avoidant relationships involve multiple cycles of breakup and reconciliation because the underlying attachment issues that caused the original breakup haven't been resolved. If they return without having done genuine work on their attachment patterns, you may find yourself in a cycle of temporary reconciliation followed by renewed withdrawal when their anxiety builds up again. This pattern can become addictive for both parties. The avoidant gets the relief of escape followed by the comfort of return, while you get the pain of abandonment followed by the joy of reunion. Understanding this cycle is crucial because it reveals why simply wanting them back isn't enough without addressing the root causes of their avoidance. The fear of engulfment, the terror of vulnerability, the deeply ingrained belief that love equals loss of self. They'll continue to cycle through the same patterns indefinitely. Each cycle often becomes more intense, with higher highs during reconnection and lower lows during separation. Knowing that they'll likely return should actually empower you to maintain higher standards for how you're treated and what you'll accept in a renewed relationship. Their return gives you leverage to insist on genuine change, professional help, or concrete demonstrations of growth before you invest your emotions again. This isn't about punishment or making them prove their worth. It's about protecting yourself from repeated drama and ensuring that any renewed relationship has a foundation for success rather than repetition of old patterns. The time apart should be used strategically for your own growth and healing rather than simply waiting for their inevitable return. This period offers precious opportunity to understand your own attachment patterns, examine why you were attracted to someone emotionally unavailable, build your self-worth independent of their validation, and create a life so fulfilling that their return becomes optional rather than necessary for your happiness. Focus on developing secure attachment within yourself. Learn to self-soothe when you feel anxious. Practice setting and maintaining boundaries. Cultivate relationships with emotionally available people, and build a support system that doesn't depend on one person meeting all your emotional needs. This internal work makes you less vulnerable to accepting poor treatment and more capable of recognizing healthy love when it appears. Examine your own patterns in the relationship. Did you ignore red flags because you were afraid of being alone? Did you tolerate poor treatment because you believed you could love them into security? Did you sacrifice your own needs to accommodate their emotional limitations? Understanding your role in the dynamic helps prevent repeating the same mistakes if you do choose to reconnect. When they do return, evaluate their growth honestly by looking for concrete evidence of change rather than just promises or explanations. Have they sought therapy specifically to address their attachment issues? Can they articulate what they learned during your time apart? Do they understand how their behavior affected you? And can they express genuine empathy for the pain they caused? Are they willing to work on their patterns consistently rather than just when the relationship is in crisis? Look for evidence of sustained change over time rather than just initial enthusiasm. Anyone can be emotionally available for a few weeks when they're motivated to win you back. The real test is whether they can maintain that availability when things get challenging, when their attachment anxiety is triggered, when the honeymoon period wears off and real intimacy is required. Consider what you need in a relationship now versus what you were willing to accept before. Your standards should have evolved during your time apart. You should now know what healthy communication looks like, what consistent treatment feels like, and what emotional availability means. Don't compromise these standards for someone who previously couldn't meet basic relationship requirements, regardless of how much you love them or how much they claim to have changed. Set clear conditions about what needs to be different this time. This might include requirements for ongoing therapy, specific communication practices during conflicts, agreements about how they'll handle their need for space without disappearing entirely, or concrete plans for how you'll handle it if they start withdrawing again. These conditions aren't demands. They're necessary boundaries that protect both of you from repeating destructive patterns. Be specific about what accountability looks like. If they've committed to therapy, how will you know they're actually going? If they've promised better communication, what does that mean in practical terms? If they've agreed to work on their patterns, how will that work be measured and maintained? Vague promises aren't sufficient. You need concrete, measurable commitments that can be evaluated over time. Pay attention to how you feel during their return rather than just what they say or promise. Does their presence feel peaceful and secure, or does it reactivate old anxiety and uncertainty? Do you find yourself walking on eggshells again, wondering when they'll pull away? Are you excited about building a future together, or are you just relieved they came back? Your nervous system often knows the truth about their emotional availability before your mind does. Notice whether they're actually different or whether you're just so grateful for their return that you're overlooking the same old patterns. It's common for people to interpret any attention from a returning avoidant as evidence of change, when in reality, nothing fundamental has shifted. Trust your instincts about whether their energy feels genuinely different or just temporarily motivated. Remember that their return doesn't mean you have to accept them back. You have the power to choose whether their presence enhances your life or complicates it. This choice should be based on evidence of real change, your own readiness to navigate potential challenges, an honest assessment of whether you can build something healthy together rather than just repeat old patterns with temporary modifications. Consider the possibility that the best response to their return might be to wish them well while maintaining your own boundaries and continuing to build the life you've created without them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and them is to recognize that you've grown beyond the dynamic that once connected you. Even if that growth happened through the pain of separation, your healing and happiness should be the primary factors in your decision, not their need for reconciliation, not the history you shared, not the potential you see in them if they could just overcome their fears. You deserve a relationship that feels consistently safe, supportive, and growth-oriented, rather than one that requires constant vigilance about whether your partner will stay emotionally present or disappear when things get challenging. If you do choose to give the relationship another chance, do so with clear boundaries, realistic expectations, and continued commitment to your own growth and well-being. Don't abandon the life you've built or the standards you've developed just because they've returned. Instead, invite them to join you in the healthier space you've created, but only if they've done the work necessary to sustain that level of emotional maturity and availability. The knowledge that avoidant exes almost always return can be both comforting and empowering. It removes the urgency and desperation that often follows avoidant breakups and allows you to focus on your own growth and healing. Whether you ultimately choose to reunite when they return is entirely up to you, but that choice should be made from a position of strength, clarity, and genuine assessment of whether they've become capable of the love you deserve, rather than hope, desperation, or fear of being alone.